友们，大家好，欢迎收看本周的完美主义，我是主持人Siobhan。上集呢，我们在里根图书馆看了它最新的展 Titanic， 那今天呢，我们就继续下面的内容吧。
Around the corner here, this is one, again from the movie, this is the Marconi room. The Marconi room is the radio operator room where they were sending out the SOS signals. Now at the time they actually called them CDQs, not SOS, but it's the same thing, and that's what they're doing. Now at the time, the rules were very different than today. Today the radios have to be monitored 24 hours a day. Back then they didn't. So when they were issuing their SOS calls, most radio operators had already gone to sleep. There was actually a ship called the Californian that was only about 30 or 40 miles away from the Titanic that could have gotten there so quickly that a lot more people could have been saved, but the radio operator was asleep. It was in his job duty to do so. He was allowed to do that. And so he never heard. He woke up the next morning and got all the little things that had come over the wire saying they were sinking. So it was the Carpathia that was many, many miles away where the radio operator was still awake who came to their rescue. And then this lifeboat, again from the movie, Lifeboat 6 in reality is a lifeboat that Margaret Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown, was on. And from survivor accounts, their lifeboat went down at about 1:10 in the morning. And at about 1:10 in the morning, the ship was going down at about 10% or 10 degrees. So we built this back wall to make it look like the ship is sinking at about 10 degrees. So now that we've talked about underneath the ocean and we've shown you the Titanic, we take you back up the stairs to show you the actual artifacts. The two things here that are quite interesting, this is actually came off of one of the lifeboats, but because it was still Morse code at the time, and there were so many ships sending out Morse code messages at the same time, messages were getting crossed, and so the wrong messages were getting picked up by radio operators. One of the first reports that came out, Titanic had hit iceberg, everyone's safe, ships being towed to Halifax. That was the first report that came across. Unfortunately, they were wrong.
Yeah.
At the time, Titanic's sinking, people realize it's going to sink. People started throwing everything overboard that they could that they thought would keep them afloat, one of which was Titanic deck chairs. They say 50, 60, 70 were thrown overboard. Unfortunately, although they kept people afloat, the water was so cold people died of hypothermia. There's about 7 deck chairs known still to exist, and we are fortunate enough to have one. So this is an actual chair from the Titanic. This is one of my favorite stories. So again, you see the movie and you think a lot of it is just Hollywood, and when I saw the movie, I've seen the movie 20 times, but there's parts where I've always thought, oh, that's just ridiculous. And one of the ones I thought that of was of the band continuing to play as the ship went
that's
down.
one of the classic scenes.
Well, it's true. And again, that's why James Cameron wanted the story to be so authentic. So there were 8 musicians on board Titanic, 2 sets of quartets that traded off playing. And the band leader was Wallace Hartley, the violin player. And as the ship began to sink, he pulled out his violin and he kept playing. And the other musicians joined him. And survivor accounts said that even as the ship was sinking and you couldn't even stand anymore, they kept playing. Unfortunately, none of the musicians lived and survived that. And when his body was found recovered about a week after the sinking, strapped to his body was this leather valise with all of the sheet music they had been playing. So this is quite extraordinary. We talk about, you know, he might not have put a person into a lifeboat, but he kept the morale up, and you know, he was a hero in his own right. So we're quite honored to have this collection here. When they were doing the recovery mission on the Mackay Bennett and other ships, every body that was recovered had its own canvas body bag, similar to this one, which was body for 155 for Mr. Gill. Not all, but most of the bodies were left in the ocean to be buried at sea. However, all of the things on that body, watches, papers, photos, were collected, put in those bags, and then given to family members. Mr. Gill had only been married 2 months when he went on the Titanic and passed away, and when they gave this bag to his wife, she did not speak for 20 years. She was just so saddened and in shock by it. We tell the story of Oscar Woody, one of the mail carriers on board the Titanic. RMS Titanic actually stands for Royal Mail Ship. I never knew that either. So he was one of the mail carriers. Found on his body was this pocket watch in his pants pocket, as well as some of the pieces of mail in his breast pocket. The reason why the mail is in such good condition is it was in his breast pocket. He was wearing a life vest, so he was found basically floating above the water because it was keeping him afloat.
And
so they were so they were staying more dry, so that's why they're not as damaged. It's pretty,
oh my goodness,
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Marion was traveling on the Titanic to meet up with her fiancé who was already in America. And she did survive, thankfully. She wore this coat off the ship as well as the blanket that's sitting on the deck chair over here. She was so happy to have survived that when she got married, she wore her lucky jacket to the wedding.
It's a marry.
Right?
Oh,
She got married, and then they had 3 sons. When all 3 sons had grown, all 3 sons went to World War II to fight. So she took her lucky jacket, she cut off the paneling, and she made Bible covers for her 3 sons to keep them safe, and they all lived. So that's a wonderful story.
How beautiful.
Right? So she was wearing this, that jacket and this blanket around her shoulders.
Right.
And when she got on the Carpathia, this is the only known deck chair from the Carpathia. It became known as the widow's chair. Now, it didn't fit Marion, but for the most part, if you were sitting on this chair in the Carpathia, you were now a widow. And so they called it the widow's chair. So very, very sad and very touching. This is actually some of the pieces that were given to members of the Carpathia for saving everybody's lives. The captain of the Carpathia actually received the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor, which is one of the highest medals Congress can bestow upon a civilian. Crew members were given medals, postcards, words of thanks, actual photographs. The people that were on the Carpathia took of people in the lifeboats from Titanic. We tell that story over here. We also tell the story of Margaret Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown. We talked about her downstairs in Lifeboat 6. She was called the unsinkable Molly Brown because she was actually quite strong. She helped row the boat. Because there weren't crew members on the boats, most people didn't even know how to row. So she helped row her boat. She helped organize relief missions, raising money for people who no longer had money. We tell that story here. This is actually her testimony of what happened that evening. She was traveling on the Titanic, bringing artifacts for a Denver museum. They all obviously or unfortunately ended up on the ocean floor. However, she grabbed one thing and put it in her pocket, which was this 1st century BC Egyptian talisman. She was so grateful for what the captain of the Carpathia did for all of them that she gifted the Egyptian talisman to the captain. Final gallery here. On the one wall is the name of all 1,500 people who did lose their lives on the Titanic, as well as the 267 American seamen who lost their lives in the Thresher and Scorpion, to bring that story back together again. And that is Titanic. 267 lost their lives when the Thresher and Scorpion went down in the 60s. And so because we start the exhibit telling that story, we wanted to finish it as well.
Yeah, that's... and not many people know about that.
Exactly. Well, because it was a top secret mission. In fact, when the Titanic was found in 1985, they couldn't tell the world that they found it because they couldn't tell the world how they found it. Because the Thresher and Scorpion was a top U.S. secret mission. It wasn't released to the public until 2008. So they just had to say, we found the Titanic! But they couldn't explain the debris field. They couldn't explain how they found it or why they found it because it was part of a top secret mission. So we're happy to be able to share that story here.
Definitely.
And that is Titanic at the Reagan Library.
But it's a lot of information and a lot of beautiful, beautiful stories and a lot of, like, my heart is just touched.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
以前讲到泰坦尼克号事件，我就会觉得这是一件很悲痛的事故。而今天参观完呢，我觉得其实在这次的事故当中，也体现了一些善良美好的人们的一些美丽的故事。所以呢，我觉得这个展真的非常值得仔仔细细的、用心的去好好看一下。这个展呢是从5月底到2018年的1月7号截止，有兴趣的朋友一定要来看一下哦。感谢您收看本周的完美主义，我是主持人丨林思月，我们下周再见。